I want to talk about flowing in your life instead of forcing and pushing from an egoic place. We are from a culture, most of us, that live in a consumeristic culture, a materialistic culture that's based on like a power dynamic, we're taught to kind of force, push, we use all this terminology all the time about this kind of aggressive mindset that's really based in the ego rather than the heart, rather than it from a place of self-love, rather than a place of self-honoring. And for those of us that want to get closer to ourselves, for those of us that want to love ourselves, for those of us that have never known how to do that, a huge part of that is the way that we speak to ourselves, the way that we motivate ourselves. And unlearning this toxic kind of forcing, pushing, aggressive mentality is a huge part of that. And it's not your fault if you think that way. It's definitely been ingrained in us. And I'm realizing the farther I get into this self-healing, self-love, journey, and ascending to a higher level, the more I realize that so much of it has to do with living from our heart instead of our ego, listening to our intuition instead of our ego. And our ego is so loud. Most of us think that we are our ego. We think that is our voice. And I'm not judging anyone for this, because I was that person for so long. We think we're our identity. We think we're our personality. These are things that the ego creates, especially through trauma and stuff. We create like these variations of ourselves in order to sustain a really difficult situation. And not everybody's experienced a ton of trauma. I personally have, so that's mostly where I come from. But for people that haven't, there's still this idea that we are our personality, and that that the voice we hear in our ego is really like the most important voice that we should be listening to. And most of us make our decisions based on what it's demanding in the moment. You know what I mean? Run away or run closer, try to like manipulate the situation to get what you want. But all of these are about control and pushing and forcing. So whether it's directed at you, so many of us do direct it ourselves, whether we're dieting and there's this like aggressive voice like you can't have this, and this like negative self-talk, when really what would be most beneficial for you is to listen to your body and let it tell you what it wants to eat, and do it from a pure place that is loving. And you know what I mean? I've lost a bunch of weight without trying, only because I was listening to my body, and it was just telling me you can't drink alcohol anymore, you can't have coffee anymore, you can't. These things are like, they just weren't working for my body. And so I started listening, and I don't have a really negative, there's no judgment. It's not this toxic. I had to unlearn so much of that in this process. Trust me, it has been really hard. But yeah, coming back to a state of grace, to a state of flow, to a state of surrender and self-love, and understanding that we can't force ourselves and push ourselves as a way to get what we want. If we want to sustain a loving relationship with ourselves, we have to understand that, our relationship with our body and our heart and our intuition is fully based on how we treat ourselves, on how willingly we listen to those aspects, those softer, more pure aspects, versus our ego. Who's in the driver's seat? Is it this petulant kind of child that represents the ego? This really critical adult, whatever, however you want to look at it, it's somebody up there judging and yelling and being forceful and pushy, and whether it's bullying you around or whether it's bullying others around, that's and each individual. I mean, we all are different, but I just really want to spread a little light and love in listening to our heart and finding that small voice within that is our intuition, buried underneath the loud cacophony of our ego, and clearing away everything that is clouding it, and really just getting in tune with what we really want, what's actually best for us, instead of listening to our ego and all of its demands. And if you are motivating yourself through this kind of like I said, with the dieting narrative of, you can't have this and you can't have that, it honestly makes me feel a little sick just like thinking about it. It's not good for you. It's not good for your body. It's not going to help you lose weight if that's what you're trying to do. If you want to find love, and there's this, if you want to have a baby before a certain, if your clock is ticking, like this whole narrative of you have to do it now or it's never going to happen, like, yeah, it makes me feel physically ill. Like, don't talk to yourself that way. Don't put yourself under that kind of pressure. Remove the pressure, breathe, and know that everything happens in a divine order. When you listen to the flow of your life, when you listen to your intuition, and instead of forcing yourself to do a bunch of things or show up in a certain way, dig deeper. Find out what your heart really wants. Find out what your true self underneath your ego, your egoic demands. And when I say you, it's not you. It's your ego's demands, and it's what culture, your culture has put on you. It's about unlearning a lot of this. So much is about learning, but so much is about unlearning in our culture, in these like materialistic, consumeristic cultures that really aren't, they're not heart-based. They're not based in value, our human selves having value. They're based in, monetary value. So just remember that the next time you start to, verbally abuse yourself, even if it's inside of your own head, especially if it's inside of your own head, because then it goes unchecked by anyone else. I'm like, check that. Check how you're talking to yourself. Is it the way your mom used to talk to you? You know what I mean? Is it her voice that you're hearing in your head? Is it your old teacher, a bully at school? Like, who is the one bullying you? It's not you. It's somebody else's voice that you took on throughout your life and you assumed responsibility for, but it's not yours. And you don't have to talk to yourself like that, and you don't have to treat yourself that way. I know I'm talking on and on about it, but I honestly just really feel like it's an important message today to just try a different method, a more loving method. The next time you feel really urgently to dictate something specific or have a certain outcome or, control a situation, even if it's something simple, like personal, just your diet, or, you need to go for a walk right now, just recognize that that's not a healthy way to speak to yourself. It's not productive. It's actually counterproductive. You're going to have a harder time achieving goals this way. So try to reframe it through a heart-based, approach, an intuitive-based approach. And if you believe in God or, angels, think about it that way. But however works for you, just know that you're precious and you deserve to be treated well in every moment in your day, and creating a flow state where you just flow through things based on what your body desires in that moment, what your intuition is telling you in that moment. You will be so much more productive. You will be so much more satisfied. You will be so much more radiant and successful and, accomplished, because you will be loving yourself first, and everything else comes second. Certainly your ego. All right.